Your kid's gym or PE class sucks. Why? Because it's just not physically demanding enough. Your kid, whether they are in elementary school or all the way up to high school, is capable of, but they also deserve more. They deserve more opportunities to develop and express strength and speed and agility and endurance. But schools rob them of that by making them sit in chairs all day without really giving them the outlet to exert themselves physically. Anyway, let's get into this. What's up, everybody? My name is Connor Adams. I'm a strength coach for youth athletes and jiu-jitsu athletes, young and old. I'm the owner of Power Stone Strength and Performance, which is my Florida-based strength and conditioning company. All right, so today's video is not about bashing PE programs at public or private schools, but I do think it's important to address the fact that they really are just not complete and that your kids are capable of, and again, they deserve more and they need it, to be honest, like to just really develop them more completely. They need more physical outlets. So today I'm gonna walk you through an entire strength training session for one of my middle school groups. You're gonna see a mix of short clips from a variety of training sessions and a bunch of clips of me talking and kind of explaining my rationale for these things. It's not going to be exercise by exercise, rep by rep, but rather a general framework for how I run these strength training sessions with these kids so that you have an idea of how things are done. And some of the videos are short because I do need to make sure that I'm spotting the kids when it's necessary so that we can maintain a safe training environment. If you're skeptical about having your kid lift weights, do any kind of strength training, or just simply be more physical, then I want you to go over and watch my most recent YouTube video where I dispel a lot of the myths around youth strength training in particular. All right, let's start with warm-ups and how we begin a training session. I see a lot of conflicting ideas on how we should be labeling these things, whether we should call them warm-ups at all, or maybe we should refer to them as something entirely different like movement prep. And to be totally honest, I don't really care, because at the end of the day, the important thing is to focus on making it fun and getting buy-in from those young athletes. The single most important attribute that a young athlete can show up with is effort. It's not about their current level of strength or athleticism. They are with me so that we can build those things. It is all about their effort. That's that one thing that they're truly in control of during these training sessions. And a great way to evoke maximum effort is through gamified drills. And I use those specifically at the beginning of our training sessions because they kind of snowball, and they snowball very well into the more organized and less chaotic and maybe even perceived as less fun parts of the training session where we do our slower paced strength training stuff. So when we do these gamified drills, they're extremely fun, but they're simultaneously improving qualities like speed, agility, and power. And it's kind of like without them knowing it. So that's the really cool part. There's essentially no way for them to successfully complete these drills other than by taking that path of max effort. Some of the drills that I have them do, you would already know, like tug of war, bear crawl races, crab walk races, and there's some other ones. But there's other ones that are a bit newer and have emerged recently from other coaches across the country, and I wanted to implement them into my training, and they have been a huge hit. One of them is the single leg off balancing game. This one's really fun. Basically, all you do is you give two kids a broomstick or a PVC pipe. You have them hop on one leg while they're trying to off balance their training partner. First person to touch both feet on the ground loses, and then they switch feet every time they lose. We'll do this for a few minutes and then we'll move on to the next game. And what's really great about this one is that it's a low level plyometric because they're constantly hopping on that one leg. So they're building capacity in those tissues within that leg that they're hopping on so that that leg and that knee can improve its ability to absorb force. And it's also just great for teaching them how to balance on one leg, especially when they're getting pushed and pulled in a variety of directions from their training partner. So after a few minutes of the single leg game, we'll move on to something that's a little bit more challenging and requires a little bit more power, explosiveness, and effort, like the broad jump cone race. I don't know if there's an official name to this game, so that's what I call it, but it's really fun. Basically, all they do with this one is they start with two cones, and they're holding one cone. They've got a broad jump as far as they can and place the cone on the ground. Then they sprint back to the start, grab the other cone, sprint to the cone that they just placed on the ground, and broad jump again, placing the next cone, and then kind of repeating that process. So they'll do that for 4 to 5 jumps. And this game's really great for teaching them how to really express maximum power with their lower body. It's also helping build agility, acceleration, and deceleration. So when you see them accelerating and stopping, they've got to change directions quickly. And that's a really important skill for young athletes to work on a lot. So we get a lot of reps in with that, and the kids have a lot of fun with it. Now, just to reiterate, these are warm-ups, but they are games at the same time. So they're fun, they're challenging. It gets them in kind of a competitive spirit, but in a very friendly way. And they really like to give it their all there. And as I mentioned before, it kind of snowballs, right? Because of the way that I communicate what the requirements for these drills are, the only path that they can take is the path of max effort. And the way that it snowballs is that because they have to basically put forth so much effort and exertion up front, like they're kind of primed and charged to do that again for whatever comes at them next. So those games are pretty chaotic and a little bit less structured. So even though when we move on to the less chaotic and more structured strength training section of the training sessions, the kids are primed and ready to give it their all there as well. And they always do. So let's just jump straight into the strength training section. When it comes to lifting, I treat the session organization for kids the same way that I would adults. We always start with the more complex multi-joint movements that demand a lot of effort and intent, and then we kind of work our way down to maybe the smaller single joint isolation exercises if there's time. But since I usually only have an hour with these kids, I do tend to just focus on the big rocks. Those are power or velocity based movements like Olympic lift variations and medicine ball slams, and then we'll move into the more traditional strength training stuff where we're doing squatting and deadlifting variations. We're doing pressing either horizontally, inclined, or overhead pressing. We also do a lot of pulling exercises, whether it be vertical or horizontal pulling. And then I also place a big emphasis on training the core holistically. So you'll often see clips of the kids doing very deep trunk rotation exercises, ab wheel rollouts, maybe some planks, and we also do a lot of leg raises. Less emphasized, but still present and important in the strength training sessions that I have with these kids are our single leg movements. So you'll see them doing split squats, lunges, maybe some single leg hinge exercises like RDL, single leg RDLs, and other variations of those. And if we are able to get through the big rocks and we've got some time to spare, I'll throw in some cool exercises like bicep curls, maybe some tricep stuff. As for sets and reps go, I tend to lean more toward a lower rep count of about 5 reps for most of the big lifts and maybe 6 to 8 reps on some of the other less demanding lifts. Now, if we're doing some sort of muscular endurance-based event like sled work, all that stuff goes out the window, right? And the weights are pretty light. They're getting a lot of reps in, and we'll treat this as more of like a muscular endurance or conditioning type of exercise. Now, I haven't really touched on exercise technique or form, so I'll just briefly touch on it here. Exercise technique is important. There's some general principles that we like to teach, especially when we're teaching things like squatting and deadlifting variations. But if these kids are young, especially in like the middle school and maybe elementary school aged brackets, you have to be patient with their level of progress. They're not going to have a picture perfect squat on day one, and I don't want them to. I want them to explore those movements and find ways for them to lift it efficiently. Now, if we see some really glaring deficiencies in the way that they move, yes, we're going to address them, and we're going to try to build up those capabilities over time before we start to slap on a lot of weight and ask a lot of their bodies. And in most cases, the kids that I work with are pretty quick learners. We're able to get through some of those deficiencies live in the sessions. And if we're not, then I'm going to help make videos or send videos to the parents so that they can kind of have their kids do some homework. And most of that homework is just like some basic flexibility stuff, because one of the hardest exercises to quote unquote master early on is going to be a barbell back squat, whether it's a high bar or a low bar. And we often work on those things together, and the kids will advance quickly through those things. And I've got plenty of cases where kids start out not really being able to squat even just with their body weight, and then in just a matter of weeks they're doing barbell based squats with weight on it. They're tolerating it well, they feel good, and it also looks good when they do it. So yes, form is important, but I don't obsess over it. in every single training session, because honestly, if you start to point out a lot of things they're doing wrong, then the session quality just gets degraded. It's not as fun for them, and they're constantly worried about what they're doing wrong instead of what they're doing right. So instead, I tend to praise, because we want to thank them and praise them for giving a lot of effort and trying really hard. Then we'll kind of layer in something that we've got to work on. And then after that, again, we're like, but again, dude, you're crushing it, right? That squat looked amazing. You learned something new today, which is awesome. So we're praising effort and we're praising learning something new. We're not always looking to just slap on a bunch of weight to the bar and, saying, good job, bro, you just lifted a ton of weight. Meanwhile, they might look like they're about to snap in half. So that's my rant on technique. It's important, but it's not the most important thing on day one. So to summarize the session structure, we do gamified warm-ups, usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes. We're building balance and coordination, power, speed, and agility. And then we'll move on to the strength training session for the remaining 45 to 50 minutes. We're gonna hit that high velocity stuff up front, whether it's gonna be an Olympic lift variation or maybe some medicine ball slams. And then we're gonna move on to that slower traditional strength training where we're hitting a squat or deadlift variation, a press, a pull, some core rotation exercises. And if there's room, we'll do some single leg stuff and maybe some single joint isolation exercises like bicep curls. We call it a day after that. The kids get an intense, productive session done, and they get a meaningful stimulus that will hopefully result in a favorable adaptation down the line, right? Them getting more stronger, more explosive, and also more injury resistant. Most of the kids I work with are with me at least 2 times per week, 60 minutes per session. Parents, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe. It's totally free to you and it helps me out a ton. Now, if you're in the Tampa Bay area and you have a kid that's interested in lifting, listen to them. This is an amazing time to get them involved in strength training, and I would be happy to work with them. But I want you to know that capacity is limited. I can really only take on 6 kids per session. And while those sessions are still available right now, they are starting to fill up. If your kid is a homeschool kid in the state of Florida, I am an approved Step Up for Student service provider. So if your kid's homeschooled or using one of those scholarships like PEP or UA, you can use those scholarship funds to pay for physical education with me. You can check out my website down below to learn a little bit more. You can see the current training schedule and just see some of the work that I'm doing with those young athletes. And if you want to see more content like this more frequently, go ahead and follow me on Instagram. I'll link everything down in the description, and I'll see you in that next video.